Hi, everyone. Thank you for coming to this mini lecture, which is provided by the Department of English at CUHK. And this mini lecture is to give you a chance to experience what it is like to take a course at our department. And I'm Professor Jookyoung, and this particular mini lecture is aligned with Applied English Linguistics. And the title of this mini lecture is, Can we predict our English learning ability from our IQ, MBTI, blood type, or zodiac? What do you think? So before we move on, let's think about some answers to some related questions, okay? For example, what do you think makes a good language learner, right? Can you think of some qualities that good language learners commonly have? What about bad language learners? And what about yourself? Do you regard yourself as a good language learner or a bad language learner? Why or why not? And think about some specific person around you. It could be your friend, your family member, or some famous people in the media, who seem to be very good at picking up a new language. What do you make them such a good language learners? Can you think of some qualities? For example, you can think of perseverance, hard work, or strong motivation, or positive attitudes towards English community or English culture, extroversion, high IQ. What do you think? It's an interesting question, isn't it? And in this particular mini lecture, we will focus on IQ, MBTI, blood type, and zodiac. Okay? And in our field, in our applied English linguistics, we say IQ is a cognitive factor. Okay, cognitive factor. What do I mean by cognitive? Cognitive means related to cognition. And what is cognition? Cognition is mental processes involved in perceiving, registering, and manipulating new information, knowledge, and etc. So IQ is an example of a cognitive factor. And what do you think? Do you think high IQ guarantees good English learning ability? So let's suppose that you have a very high IQ. It means you are very smart. And if you are smart, you must be good at learning English because English is such a complex language. So you should be smart. It makes sense, right? What about MBTI? MBTI is to categorize people's personality types, and we call it an affective factor. And what I mean by affective is something related to our feelings, emotions, attitudes. Okay, some other factors may include motivation, self-esteem, self-efficacy, or anxiety, extroversion, introversion. These are affective factors. So let's say if you are an extrovert person, you may easily approach new people and you feel comfortable when you are surrounded by new environment, when you process new stimuli, and you don't be afraid when you approach a native speaker and have a conversation, so you must be good at learning English. And if you are an introvert person, you become easily anxious when you talk to native speakers, when you are surrounded by new environment, so you must be less good at learning English. Does it make sense? It is an interesting question, isn't it? Right? So let's first talk about IQ. Again, a cognitive factor. Okay? So what is IQ, by the way? We think we know what IQ is. In fact, it is not that easy to understand what IQ is. And IQ stands for intelligence quotient. Okay? Intelligence quotient. And as you can notice from the term quotient, it is to rank people along a line and divide people. Okay? And it says that IQ draws a bell curve. So it looks like this, like a mountain. Okay? And then right in the middle, there's IQ of 100. So let's say if you have an IQ of 100, it means that you're right in the middle, 50 percentile. So below you, there are 50% of people, and above you, there are another 50% of people. And you will see a lot fewer and fewer people along the two tails. And IQ is a score from a standardized intelligence test. Okay, so in order to know your IQ, you have to take an IQ test. So have you ever taken an IQ test? And in fact, I have taken an IQ test because my mom, when I was young, was a bit worried about my school performance. So she brought me to this institute and I took this IQ test and the result was okay. I was right in the middle, so my mom was relieved. Although I'm not that smart, I was not dumb. So happy ending. And I remember some of the items when I took an IQ test. When you take an IQ test, you will see some mathematical problems, which it requires you to perform some mathematical skills, okay? And there are also some verbal skill problems. And many of them require you to make analogies between words. For example, book is to read, and then fork is to, and then you're supposed to choose eat, right? And there are also some problems that you're provided with this shapes, and you're supposed to manipulate the shape in your head. You may require to spin the shape, or sometimes you are provided with this 3D block formation, and you have to count the number of the blocks, and then you have to choose the right number among some multiple choices. So based on your performance on that type of IQ test, your IQ score is obtained. So as you can notice from my description of an IQ test, in a traditional term, IQ test is to measure your intelligence, and intelligence is regarded as a sum of linguistic and non-linguistic skills. And non-linguistic skills involve mathematical and logical skills. Okay, so I'm gonna give you the answer straight away. Because there have been many studies that investigated if IQ can predict our foreign or second language learning ability, because it's such an interesting question. And the answer is no. Surprisingly, no. Okay, because there were many people with very high IQ, but not very good at learning English. And there were many people with relatively lower IQ score, but very good at English learning. So IQ may not be able to predict someone's English learning ability. Of course, IQ was shown to have some meaningful relationship with some part of linguistic knowledge, because, linguistic knowledge can be divided into two categories. One is BICS, B-I-C-S, and the other one is CALP, C-A-L-P. And what I mean by BICS is basic interpersonal communicative skills. And BICS is a type of knowledge you rely on when you have conversations with your friends, when you talk to your mom, something that when you have some casual conversations. Whereas CALP, C-A-L-P, stands for Communicative Academic Language Proficiency. And you need CALP when you do homework, when you read textbooks, when you take a test in a classroom setting. Okay, so it has a strong relevance to your school performance. And it has been shown that IQ may have a stronger relationship with your school performance or CALP, but not really with BICS. And the very concept of intelligence is questionable as well. Because as I mentioned earlier, in a traditional term, intelligence is what? Your linguistic and mathematical logical skills. But these days, we say that there are different types of intelligence. For example, there is this researcher named Gardner, and he proposed the concept of multiple intelligence, saying that there are whole different types of intelligence. For example, you may have musical intelligence, right? Musical intelligence, your ability to identify and register a musical note. And in fact, it has some relevance to your English learning ability because in your brain, the brain section that is responsible for your musical intelligence is right next to your language sector in your brain. So there has been many interesting research findings showing that if you have this musical sensitivity, musical intelligence, you may be very good at perceiving and producing foreign language pronunciation and mimicking native-like intonation, okay? And there could be some interpersonal skills, interpersonal intelligence. You see, there are some people who are very good at having comfortable conversations with even people who they just met, right? And it also has some relevance to your English learning ability because obviously, if you have this interpersonal intelligence, you may be better at having conversations using English, right? Some communicative skills. Or there could be bodily kinesthetic intelligence, the ability to control your body muscles. And surprisingly, it also has relevance to English learning because in order to pronounce this, your second or foreign language, you have to move your articulatory organs like your lips, tongues, and everywhere. And this requires your ability to control your muscles, so it has relevance to your bodily kinesthetic intelligence. And there are some more, meaning intelligence or IQ in its traditional term has much limitations when it comes to accounting for your English learning ability. Okay, so in short, the conclusion is the impact of intelligence is not significant, or at least inconclusive when it comes to learning English. Are you not still convinced? You say, no way, IQ must matter. You know what? I can give you a very compelling evidence. There was this learner who was an autistic savant, okay, autistic savant. His name was Christopher. And I'm gonna read out loud what he was like as reported in research paper, okay? Christopher is unique. He is institutionalized because he's unable to look after himself. He has difficulty in finding his way around. He has poor hand-eye coordination, turning many everyday tasks, such as shaving or button up his shirt, into a burdensome chores. So he was unable to do many everyday routines by himself. Again, he was an autistic savant, but he can write, read, and communicate in any of 15 to 20 languages. And among the languages Christopher mastered were Danish, Dutch, Finnish, French, German, modern Greek, Hindi, Italian, Norwegian, Polish, Portuguese, Russian, Spanish, Swedish, Turkish, and even Welsh. So he was unable to button up his shirt, but he was able to read, write, and communicate in any of these languages. So now, are you convinced? IQ does not matter, especially in its traditional term, when it only concerns your linguistic or non-linguistic, mathematical and logical skills. By the way, Christopher is indeed interesting, right? How could he master all those languages so easily? And in order to account for that kind of phenomena, we coined this concept aptitude. It is not attitude, it is aptitude, aptitude. It means your inherent talent, your natural talent of learning a new language. And it is, in fact, measurable because there is this test that measures your language learning aptitude. The name of the test is MLAT. It stands for Modern Language Aptitude Test. And when you take this MLAT, you are required to learn an artificial language. So it is not a natural human language. It does not exist on Earth. It is a made-up language by researchers. And you have to learn this artificial man-made language. And if you are good at it, you will score high on the test, and it means you could be quite good at learning a new language. If you score relatively low, it means you may have a little more difficulty when acquiring a new language. So, okay, can you make a conclusion here? So when it comes to English learning, IQ does not matter, but aptitude matters. You know what? In the field of applied English linguistics, things are not that simple. Things are, I would say, pleasantly complex, okay? Because here comes another factor, age. Because if you learn this new language before a certain period of your lifetime, you will be very good at learning the language regardless of your language learning aptitude. We call it a critical period or a sensitive period, okay? And that period ranges from your birth to a very early stage of your life, like 7, 8. I mean, researchers are still debating. We cannot set a arbitrary age, but anyways, it is a very early stage of your life. And if you are exposed to a second or foreign language in this period, you will be very likely to be good at it, regardless of your language learning aptitude. But once you pass that period, perhaps aptitude may have a stronger predictive power. Okay, and let's move on to MBTI, the next factor. So MBTI is to categorize people's personality types, okay? And have you ever taken an MBTI? In fact, I have taken an MBTI test, and my type is ISFJ, which is the most common, okay? And there are 16 MBTI types, depending on your responses to an MBTI test. And in this MBTI test, there are 4 domains. Firstly, it measures whether you are an extrovert or introvert person, so E or I. And the second domain is whether you prefer to process or rely on some concrete data or you follow your intuition, so sensors or intuitives. And then whether you prefer logical reasoning or you follow your gut feeling. And then lastly, judgers, and then perceivers, accepting the perceptions. So depending on your responses to an MBTI test, your MBTI type out of 16 is determined. And this test is very different from IQ test. Remember, when you were taking an IQ test, you are supposed to solve some mathematical problems. You had to make analogies between words, and you had to manipulate shapes in your brain, 2D, 3D shapes. But when it comes to MBTI test, you are provided with a list of sentences, okay? And you have to make an introspective response to those statements. And what I mean by introspective is what? Intro meaning looking into yourself, and then spect means to look. So look into your side, inside. Okay? So for example, you will read a sentence such as, your travel plans are more likely to look like a rough list of ideas than a detailed itinerary. What do you think? And you are supposed to choose one of the options. And the options are on a continuum. Okay? And it looks like strongly agree, agree, neutral, disagree, and strongly disagree. And depending on your introspective self-reflection, you decide your response out of those scales, okay? And some of the other statements may include, you often think about what you should have said in a conversation long after it has taken place. Strongly agree. If your friend is sad about something, your first instinct is to support them emotionally, not try to solve their problems. What is your response? I'll say strongly agree. Let's say, you often rely on other people to be ones to start a conversation and keep it going. Agree? Or you rarely worry if you made a good impression on someone you met. Strongly disagree. I always worry about that. So you see, you will read these type of statements and you keep responding to those statements depending on your self-introspection. And depending on your responses, your MBTI type out of 16 is determined. Okay, so we have this hypothesis. MBTI type may matter when it comes to your English learning ability. And this is a worthwhile research question. This is an interesting research question. And how can you find the answer to this question? Would you follow your intuition? It must matter, right? It must matter. Just following your intuition, your gut feeling. Or you may observe one or two cases around you. You know what? I know this person with this MBTI type, and he's super good at learning English. So you know what? MBTI matters. When it comes to applied English linguistics, it does not work that way. We have to take a scientific approach, okay? And what I mean by scientific approach is scientific sounds so daunting, but it is not. It simply means you need to first have some real data, okay? So if I were to answer this question, I would recruit people with all different MBTI types, all 16 types, and then I may ask them to take an MLAT test. Do you remember? It is the language learning aptitude test, right? And then I'm gonna observe very closely whether there is any interesting pattern from the relationship between MBTI type and then MLAT scores. For example, it is possible that some MBTI type seems to be significantly better, scored significantly higher MLAT score than others. Then we can say MBTI type may matter. However, if there is no significant, no clear pattern emerging from the data, there seems to be no meaningful relationship between any of the MBTI types and the MLA test scores or English language proficiency scores, we cannot make a firm conclusion and reject our hypothesis. It was an interesting hypothesis, but we have to reject that. And in fact, there are many studies that investigated if people's personality as measured with an MBTI test can predict our English learning ability. And again, The answer is no, there is no significant evidence. There's no meaningful relationship between your MBTI type and your English learning ability. I'm sorry to disappoint you, but this is the conclusion. And there are many different ways to categorize people because we are always tempted to categorize people into some simplistic terms. I will show you some interesting image that I found from the internet. And it is the spinning girl, and you are supposed to choose if she is spinning to the right or spinning to the left. And it looks like this. Have you ever seen this type of images? I'm sorry. Okay. And it said that if you think to your eyes, if you think the girl seems to spinning to the left, it is said you are a left-brain person, and if the girl spins to the right, then you are a right-brain person. And if you are a left-brain person, the way of your thinking is more analogic and analytic, and you prefer to analyze details. Whereas if you are on right-brain people, you prefer to follow your gut feelings, but you are creative, and etc. And can you make any meaningful conclusion out of your feeling, your perception of the direction the girl is spinning? No, actually you cannot. What about blood types? In many Asian countries, there is this belief that people's blood type, A, B, and O, has a relationship with your personality. It goes like blood type A respects harmony, whereas blood type O is more social, and it goes on. And some people goes even further. They say some particular blood type has higher intelligence, and it goes on and on. So can we make a conclusion, a meaningful conclusion, if any of this blood type is superior to others when it comes to learning English? Again, if we want to answer these interesting questions, you need some data. Although it is very tempting to categorize people into some simplistic terms like left-right brain, MBTI type, IQ, or even zodiac. By the way, my birth year zodiac is monkey, and my astrological sign is Aquarius. Does it mean anything when it comes to my English learning ability? Again, if you want to test this interesting hypothesis, you need to analyze real language data. And where do data come from? It can come from your real life language use. For example, your phone conversations, your email correspondences, or your postings on social network media, or your just casual conversations with your friends in the street. Perhaps these type of data must be the most meaningful data because it reflects your real life, authentic language use. And data can also come from your self-report, your responses to, for example, surveys, interviews, or even diaries. These are a very important sources of data. Or it doesn't have to be linguistic data. It could be some numbers, that is test scores like TOEFL, IELTS, TOEIC, or even some tailor-made test, which is developed for a research purpose. So you first need to gather some concrete, meaningful data, and you have to analyze the data in a systematic way that can be supported by theories. And only by then, you can make a meaningful conclusion, and you can accept or reject all those hypotheses. And if you join our department, you can take many more courses on applied English linguistics. And the theories, research findings that you will learn in those courses will amaze you, because by then you will become able to understand your own English learning and using experiences. Oh, that's why that learning method worked well while this didn't. Or, oh, that's why I had a difficulty in understanding, postings on social network, and etc. Okay, so I hope you enjoyed this mini lecture, and I hope to see you again in the campus. And if you have any questions, interesting ideas, don't hesitate to email me. Then I'll be happy to answer your questions. Thank you for your time, and see you.